When the Houthis dare to challenge the might of the United States Navy by targeting massive warships patrolling the strategic waterways of the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden, they're not just lighting a fuse. They're unleashing a tidal wave of American retaliation, technology, and power unlike anything they've ever faced before. It begins with a launch, an armed drone, a cruise missile, or a small high-speed boat packed with explosives, cutting across the waves with one intention: to cripple or humiliate the most dominant naval force on the planet. But the moment that threat is airborne or afloat, American warships like the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers or the formidable Nimitz-class aircraft carriers spring into action with a choreography of precision and training decades in the making. Radar systems like the Spy, 1DN, and Slash-Spy 6 light up the skies with near-instant detection. Threats are classified within seconds. Orders are issued. Within moments, the destroyer's vertical launch system erupts, sending SM-2 or SM-6 missiles screaming toward the enemy threat at supersonic speeds. If a drone or missile gets too close, the Phalanx CIWS, a multi-barrel Gatling gun nicknamed R2D2 by sailors, unleashes a deafening hail of 20mm rounds, shredding targets with terrifying accuracy. Meanwhile, electronic warfare systems jam guidance signals and scramble enemy sensors, turning advanced Houthi weaponry into blind, drifting debris. For the Houthi attackers, it's a lesson written in fire and steel. Attacking a U.S. Navy vessel isn't just a gamble. It's an invitation to experience the overwhelming force projection of the most technologically advanced and battle-ready maritime force in the world. And it doesn't stop there. When such provocations occur, the Navy's rules of engagement are clear. Neutralize the threat, then send a message. Carrier-based F/A-18 Super Hornets roar off the decks of carriers like the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower or the USS Gerald R. Ford, armed with precision-guided munitions and tasked with locating and destroying the launch site. Drones, bunkers, radar installations, and even mobile launch trucks are obliterated in pinpoint airstrikes coordinated by AWACS and guided by real-time satellite imagery. U.S. Navy SEALs and Special Operations Forces might be deployed covertly for reconnaissance or target designation, and if the situation escalates further, even long-range assets like B-1B Lancers from distant air bases can enter the fray. Meanwhile, the public might only hear a brief statement from CENTCOM about a defensive action, but behind that calm language lies a whirlwind of military retaliation. For every drone launched, there could be a dozen missiles returned. For every skirmish at sea, there's a chain of retaliation that echoes through Yemen's rugged terrain and sends shockwaves across the region. But it's not just about retaliation, it's about deterrence. The U.S. Navy operates under the principle of freedom of navigation, and any attempt to disrupt that in international waters is treated as a direct threat to global commerce and allied security. That's why U.S. warships operate in convoys, escorted by cruisers, destroyers, and surveillance aircraft like the P-8 Poseidon scanning hundreds of miles in every direction. Each ship is a floating fortress, equipped with layered defense systems capable of responding to threats from sea, air, and land, all coordinated through the Navy's Aegis combat system, which turns separate platforms into a single integrated shield of war-fighting dominance. The Houthis, often backed with Iranian technology and guidance, may hope to score a propaganda victory or disrupt global trade by attacking these ships, but what they underestimate is the sheer resilience, power, and adaptability of the U.S. Navy. These vessels are built to fight through anything. Even if an impact were to occur, damage control crews trained like elite firefighters swing into action within seconds, sealing compartments, rerouting power, fighting fires, and ensuring the ship remains in the fight. There's a reason U.S. Navy ships haven't been sunk in modern warfare. It's not just engineering, it's the sailors, trained for years to handle the unthinkable. For every Houthi attack attempt, hundreds of American sailors and airmen are prepared to execute a deadly symphony of retaliation. From guided missile cruisers launching Tomahawks to allied nations like the UK or France contributing naval power in joint task forces, the response is swift, calculated, and unforgiving. In recent years, Houthi aggression in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and Red Sea has increased, targeting commercial ships and occasionally threatening U.S. assets. But every time, the result is the same. Enemy forces find themselves overwhelmed, their launch platforms destroyed, their command centers scrambled, and their efforts exposed as futile in the face of American air and sea dominance. Even the intelligence side of these operations is formidable. Drones circling high above, NSA and CIA assets monitoring comms, and U.S. cyber warfare teams intercepting and jamming enemy transmissions. All work in unison to predict attacks before they happen and prevent them before they can make impact. And when the Houthis make a mistake and go too far, like attempting to strike a major carrier group, the hammer drops hard. Carrier strike groups bring more than air power. They bring submarines lurking beneath the surface, armed with torpedoes and cruise missiles that can level launch sites from hundreds of miles away. They bring marine expeditionary units capable of launching amphibious operations. They bring deterrence, not just enemies, but assurance to allies in the region. American resolve doesn't waver. It's built into the steel of these ships, into the fighter jets screaming overhead, and into every sailor on deck ready to answer the call. The message is clear. Attack the U.S. Navy, and you face the full wrath of a nation armed with unmatched capability, unyielding will, and a deep understanding that peace is preserved through strength. While the Houthis may see themselves as David against Goliath, they fail to recognize that Goliath isn't slow or blind. He's a modern war machine with eyes in the sky, ears on every frequency, and a response time measured in seconds. And for every action taken against an American ship, there is a ledger being written, a record that guarantees justice, precision, and overwhelming retaliation. This is what happens when the Houthis attack U.S. Navy ships. Defeat, exposure, and escalation they're ill-equipped to survive. Because when the stars and stripes flies from the mast of a warship, it carries not just a symbol, but a warning. We are always ready. But let's take a deeper look into the actual ripple effects these attacks have not only on military operations, but on global geopolitics. When the Houthis engage in provocative act against massive U.S. Navy ships, they don't just spark a tactical firefight. They trigger a strategic chess match involving not only the Pentagon, but allies like Saudi Arabia, Israel, the UK, and NATO observers. The Navy's response is never just limited to the sea. Satellites orbiting high above the region begin imaging suspected launch zones. Intelligence communities collaborate to trace supply lines back to Iran, and military analysts begin drafting response packages that consider every angle, military, political, and diplomatic. Combatant commanders in CENTCOM immediately consult with naval strike group leaders, often rerouting additional destroyers or cruisers to high-risk zones, while B-52s or F-22s are put on alert status, ready to provide long-range support or initiate strikes deep into hostile territory if needed. Meanwhile, Task Force 55, which operates in the Fifth Fleet's area of responsibility, begins full-scale readiness exercises, locking down logistics hubs, inspecting Patriot and THAAD systems on land bases, and preparing for coordinated operations with U.S. Marine units in the region. These attacks also trigger real-time war games, simulated conflict scenarios, to prepare the fleet for any evolution of Houthi tactics. Will they swarm a destroyer with speedboats? Will they attempt GPS spoofing on high-value assets? Will they employ kamikaze UAVs at low altitude to sneak past radar? Each of these possibilities is modeled, countermeasured, and trained for. And for every hour that passes after a Houthi launch, the U.S. Navy is not just on alert. It's improving, adapting, and growing more dangerous. At sea, it's a layered defense doctrine. Massive Aegis-equipped destroyers operate as shields for the carrier, working in a kill chain that starts with early detection from aircraft like the E-2D Hawkeye, which circles high above and sees hundreds of miles in every direction. If an incoming drone is spotted, it might be assigned to a guided missile cruiser armed with dozens of interceptors, while separate drone swarm might be jammed mid-flight by A-18G Growlers running electronic warfare suppression missions. In these moments, the Navy becomes a living organism. Radar, sonar, communications, fire control, and countermeasures all function in a synchronized ballet of defense. Below the surface, Virginia-class submarines quietly stalk potential enemy vessels, ready to strike at the first sign of escalation. And above, the skies are ruled by the Navy's strike fighters. Super Hornets loaded with AMRAAMs and DAMs fly constant CP, combat air patrol, missions over the task force. They are the sword to the fleet's shield, waiting for the green light to eliminate threats before they even reach visual range. Back on land, a whole different type of response unfolds. Intelligence agencies like the DIA and NSA begin to coordinate cyber forensic teams to uncover how the attack was coordinated, who funded it, and what communication paths were used. These data trails often lead to foreign proxy networks and supply chains that are then flagged for future sanctions, cyber sabotage, or drone strikes. And in Washington, D.C., Pentagon briefings are rapidly prepared for President, the Joint Chiefs, and Congressional Defense Committees. Every leader needs to be ready for the public narrative, because in a world connected by media and perception, the story of what happened is almost as important as the reality. News of an attempted attack on a U.S. warship makes headlines globally, and allies immediately take notice. NATO nations often issue their own condemnations, and sometimes reposition their own naval assets in solidarity. You might see a Royal Navy destroyer rendezvous with a U.S. carrier group, or a French Rafale fighter conduct joint patrols with American jets as a show of unity and resolve. But more than anything, these incidents offer a sharp reminder to the world that peace at sea is not guaranteed. It is enforced day by day by the presence of disciplined American firepower. The Houthis may believe that asymmetric warfare allows them to strike without consequence, but every action they take is cataloged, analyzed, and met with overwhelming force. Consider the psychological toll on those launching the attacks. After every drone is shot down, every missile fails to hit its mark, the realization sets in. Their weapons can't match the speed, precision, or coordination of the United States Navy. Morale fractures. Commanders begin to doubt. Technicians struggle to troubleshoot systems scrambled by U.S. jammers. The Navy doesn't just defeat threats. It breaks enemy will through technological and tactical superiority. Every counterattack reinforces that imbalance, like a drumbeat of dominance echoing across the Gulf. In recent cases, even attempted Houthi attacks have resulted in pinpoint retaliatory strikes. Drone launchers hidden in mountain villages have been neutralized by Tomahawk crews, missiles launched from hundreds of miles away. Radar facilities supporting enemy targeting operations have gone offline overnight, leaving the enemy blind. And when necessary, covert teams of U.S. and allied operators enter contested territory to deliver justice with quiet precision, leaving no fingerprints, only devastation. These moments never make it to public news feeds in their full scope, but military observers know. This is how the U.S. wins modern wars. Not just with bombs, but with integration, intelligence, and unmatched coordination. In this theater of shadows and strikes, the American naval doctrine shines. It is not reckless. It is not reactionary. It is methodical, strategic, and unrelenting. And for the Houthi fighters, some trained, some radicalized, many misled, it becomes increasingly clear that provoking the United States is not a path to martyrdom or victory. It's a fast lane to obliteration. When a U.S. warship moves through contested waters, it brings not only protection for global trade routes, it carries a legacy of deterrence built on sacrifice, technology, and a belief that freedom of navigation is a principle worth defending with firepower if necessary. Whether sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Aden, or the Arabian Sea, these vessels are not alone. They are watched by satellites, supported by air bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and Djibouti, and backed by a president and a Pentagon that will never allow an attack to go unanswered. What happens when the Houthis attack massive U.S. Navy ships? The answer isn't found in a single missile launch or a short-lived drone assault. It's found in the relentless counterforce that follows, the intelligence that traces every step back to its source, and the global coordination that ensures every American sailor comes home with the mission complete. The message has been delivered many times, but if it must be sent again, the Navy is always ready to repeat it, with missiles, with jets, and with the full force of American resolve. What the world often overlooks in the shadow of flashy headlines is the long game the United States plays in maritime warfare. When the Houthis attack U.S. Navy ships, it doesn't simply provoke a firefight. It activates a full-spectrum response that reverberates across oceans, continents, and diplomatic channels. U.S. Navy leaders, backed by decades of war gaming and crisis simulations, do not respond emotionally. They respond surgically. Precision is the name of the game. While surface ships deploy rolling airframe missiles and CIWS, phalanx systems, to shred incoming drones or rockets, electronic warfare officers jam enemy signals, cutting off communications mid-attack. Navy cyber teams go to work immediately, hacking into the digital infrastructure behind the assault, crippling command relays, exposing IP trails, and uploading malware into foreign drone control systems. This digital front is silent but devastating. The result is often confusion and failure on the attacker's side. As guidance systems fail, commands are ignored, and drones crash into the sea without ever seeing their target. But that's just the beginning. If the attack was significant enough, the Navy initiates retaliatory operations under Operational Security, OPSEC. Satellites operated by the NRO, paired with airborne ISR platforms like the MQ, 9 Reaper, or RQ for Global Hawk, map out enemy positions. These assets stream data in real time to command centers on board U.S. flagships or to regional hubs like Al Udeid Air Base. Meanwhile, analysts at CENTCOM headquarters develop a strike package. Within hours, Tomahawks are programmed with GPS coordinates and terrain contours, launched silently from submarines or Arleigh Burke-class destroyers positioned beyond the horizon. Within minutes, those missiles fly low and fast, hugging terrain and smashing into command bunkers, radar stations, or weapon storage sites, turning Houthi assets into flaming wreckage. Precision drone strikes often follow, guided by thermal imagery and laser designators. Armed Reapers patrol the skies, ready to unleash Hellfire missiles on enemy convoys or commanders in transit. If necessary, special operations units are inserted by stealth helicopters or submarines. Navy SEALs or MARSOC teams tasked with capturing or eliminating high-value targets. These missions are quiet, fast, and brutal. The public may never hear about them, but their impact is felt in every Houthi camp. Fear spreads. The knowledge that nowhere is safe, that American eyes see everything and American steel can reach anywhere, crushes morale. The Houthi leadership begins to question the wisdom of provoking a superpower. The reality of this response is not cinematic. It's relentless, clinical, and inevitable. But even before missiles fly or boots hit the ground, the U.S. Navy asserts dominance with presence. Massive strike groups, including Nimitz or Ford-class, carriers shift course into the region. Each of these floating cities is a powerhouse of destruction, carrying up to 90 aircraft and protected by a flotilla of cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. Carrier air wings launch constant patrols, establishing air superiority and photographing every square mile of territory. Hawkeyes map the skies. Super Hornets and Growlers perform show-of-force maneuvers, dropping flares, painting enemy positions with radar, and daring any adversary to make a move. And just in case, these jets are armed to the teeth. AMRAAMs, Sidewinders, dams, and laser-guided bombs loaded and ready. The message is clear. The U.S. Navy doesn't bluff. And if the attack crosses a certain threshold, injuring sailors, damaging hulls, or endangering strategic operations, the gloves come off. Battle-hardened Marines from the 26th MEU or soldiers from forward-deployed Army bases are rapidly mobilized. Amphibious assault ships carrying Ospreys, Cobras, and tanks begin steaming toward hotspots. Commanders issue alerts to regional allies. Multinational task forces activate. Saudi and Emirati jets join in. Israeli radar arrays begin sharing telemetry. And the coalition of consequence begins to turn. For the Houthis, their boldness turns to panic. After-action reports from previous attacks show how rapidly the tide turns. In one case, a drone swarm launched from a Yemeni coast was neutralized within 12 seconds, intercepted by SM-6 missiles and CIWS before it even got within 3 miles. In the aftermath, U.S. cyber teams traced the command links to a compound outside Sana'a. Days later, that compound was obliterated by precision airstrikes, with no civilian casualties. In another incident, Houthis launched anti-ship ballistic missiles toward a Navy support vessel. The missile was detected by Aegis radar, tracked, and destroyed mid-flight by a SM-3 interceptor in a scene more dramatic than a Hollywood movie. The Navy's defensive bubble worked exactly as intended, and within hours, retaliatory drones destroyed the launch site, which turned out to be hidden in an abandoned warehouse, a warehouse that had once stored UN food aid. These propaganda-fueled groups often use such civilian structures as shields, knowing the U.S. avoids collateral damage. But the Navy has evolved. With infrared scans, drone flyovers, and ground intel, they isolate threats and eliminate them with pinpoint accuracy. It's not just retaliation, it's justice. These operations aren't just about defeating an enemy. They're about making sure that enemy never tries again. And behind every missile, every maneuver, every calculated strike, is a warning to the world. Attacking U.S. Navy ships is a one-way ticket to destruction. American resolve is not up for debate. With each incident, the U.S. demonstrates its ironclad commitment to peace through strength. And beyond the battlefield, the aftermath of these attacks echoes through international politics. U.S. allies double down on naval support. Japan and Australia commit to more patrols. The U.K. deploys Type 45 destroyers for joint operations. NATO fleets conduct joint drills with U.S. carrier strike groups in the Mediterranean, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. Global shipping companies, reassured by the Navy's swift response, resume operations with confidence. Insurance markets stabilize. Oil prices dip back into normal range. And stability returns, thanks to American might. But this comes at a cost. For every successful defense, there are thousands of sailors, airmen, and analysts working round the clock. These are men and women who haven't seen home in months, who sleep beneath the deck of a ship that might be targeted at any moment, who write letters to loved ones just in case. Their dedication is what keeps the sea lanes open and the world economy afloat. And it's not just about defending America. It's about defending the global order from chaos. The Houthis, for all their bravado, are simply a small gear in a larger machine of instability fueled by proxy wars, rogue states, and terrorist networks. Their goal is not to defeat the U.S., but to disrupt, to provoke, to earn attention. But what they receive instead is a masterclass in overwhelming force. The modern U.S. Navy is not just a fighting force. It's a symbol of readiness, a symbol of deterrence, and a promise that aggression will be met with fire, fury, and absolute dominance. So what happens when the Houthis attack massive U.S. Navy ships? Their launchers go up in flames. Their control centers go dark. Their leadership goes silent. Their plans are shattered. And their networks are dismantled one by one. In short, they lose badly every